Welcome to another Baby Theater in the Dark. Today, we're going to be talking about an ancient creature called the Mariana. Now, the Mariana is a creature with many limbs. It's simply unimaginable, actually. I would say that each limb represents a life in the world. Yet, even with that, it may not count the many, many limbs. So, as you can see or hear, the being reaches out long distances throughout space. Well, there was once that it did come upon the earth. It was a strange event that many don't understand, and I'd like to address it here today. Well, you see, this being is not only limitless, but it's also limb-full. So, an astronomer by the name of Samuel Tenko first established a connection with the being, not through the simple means of using a telescope, for example, but also by the means of telepathy. You see, he studied many forms of telepathy, as if it were his last breath, his last-ditch effort to reach the spaces. There are a few ways to communicate throughout space. However, this one particular event really did scar the entire world with radiant pain. Yet, it utilized the world in a way that had never been done before. You see, there are two forms of spherical pressure. The core of the earth spins in one direction, and the crust of the earth spins in another direction. Now, this is very important when you think about communication and batteries of sort. Well, imagine the planet being its own battery, producing energy for itself. Many have tried to tap into this power. Most famous of them all would be probably Tesla. Yet, none have truly fulfilled a universal method to do so. So, the impressive thing about this feat is that he was able to not only produce power from the earth itself, but also utilize that power to transmit his own voice throughout space. Well, I'll tell you, the creature did hear and came running. But the strange event simply appeared to be just like any other event, as the tentacles of the creature, the limbs, they were invisible to the naked eye. But he was able to feel them. He was able to feel every single tentacle as they embraced upon his body. He felt the touch as if saying hello for the first time to something amazing. It entered into his mind and screamed into it. Of course, this simply caused him to go mad. He felt like he was the only one who'd truly unlocked this masterpiece. Yet, here it was before him, and all he could do was scream. Scream as the being screamed. But once he stopped screaming, he began to realize that his brain had collapsed. Yet, he still was alive. He could no longer hear the voices in his head, nor could he hear or see any images in his mind. He attempted to think of anything he could, but it was blocked. Any short-term and long-term memory were simply static. As if he had waken up and everything that he just experienced were a dream. Yet he still lived it. That night he laid his head down and attempted to sleep. But he found that sleep would never come. He began to realize that sleep would never come. Upon the fourth day, and yet his brain felt sharpest, sharper than it ever had been before. Yes, sure, he wasn't able to think, but he also had all the energy in the world. And nothing that could burn him, nothing that could touch him. He got up on the 26th day with energy out, just astonishing energy. He cooked himself breakfast and he burnt himself on the pan while he was cooking some Eggos. And he looked upon his hand, he peered upon it. And there was no burn. He began to question reality at this point. Had he truly died? No, he could still communicate with the living. Was he going mad? Well, it did seem as such. So, he arose again, and he thought deeper and deeper. Yet there was no sound. No image, nothing. His brain a blank slate. Now, you must imagine being a creature from the depths of space. Someone reaches out to you, speaking to you. You reach back, and they speak to you for a moment, but now he felt like he was left on red. Well, the creature wasn't happy about that. So he began to spin the Earth's core, reverses. Now, this would typically cause the Earth to go into a free fall. But in this case, Earth just twitched a slight bit, and then it was normal again. Now, what had happened truthfully was much like the ear the brain can only handle so much, and, well, if the decibels are loud enough, well, it'll break. But the creature still tried to communicate. The worst of it all was when it began to try to use his own blood. You see, the blood itself wasn't the issue. It was the veins. Yes, he would look down upon his arm and see strange letters he'd never known before, ripped into his skin, his veins making the sounds and making the formation of what could only be called an cacophony of death, destruction. The screams were unfathomable, but now he knew he was immune to death, immune to time. He simply existed as any would exist, as any ever had existed. Yet, this was more powerful than anything that he would imagine being. However, one thing he did not fail to feel is pain. Yes, he felt the pain of the veins ripping out forward and spelling out these symbols. He felt the pain. Tears streamed down upon his face. All he wanted to do was reach out. He reached out to a colleague of his. He told him the story. The colleague was obviously skeptical. You've been up 2 years? Well, that doesn't seem fathomable. Yes. The colleague truly didn't believe him. But the reality was the truth. His colleague, she began to think about this event, began to really focus upon it. And she finally made this decision. I, Rosa, will take on this task, and I'll reach out upon the heavens and seek out this being you speak of. Now, the being was quite angry at this point. It felt like it wasn't being heard, and therefore it did not care about the pain it inflicted. It only cared about the message that it was attempting to send. As soon as Rosa reached out telepathically, in the same way, utilizing the Earth's crust and Earth's rotational value to transmit the signal. Oh, it heard. And it replied back in a much nicer tone this time. Something like a high-pitched silver tone. Such like that. Now, this was not as loud as the screams and destruction that he had heard. And so her mind did not get fully wiped. She laughed immediately and knew that it was reaching out upon her. And she did again feel those tentacles wrap around her and begin to message her. And yes, she would be the one to tell it. She had to be the one to tell it that it was a creature of destruction. And that it had to go far away from the only planet that reached out to the depths. The creature, sorrowful, realized that it had done such irreparable damage to the Earth and also to the people in it. The only people that reached out to him. He hurt them both. And with one final flea, Rose's mind snapped as well. But she, being that it simply wasn't enough to completely shatter and deafen her mind, she instead went full-blown mad. It was the last time anybody had really seen her. But I will say the last video footage that was found of Rosa was of her ripping a house upon the ground to the sky and flipping it into the dirt as if it were a coin. She's out there somewhere. And the creature, it did flee. But it still waited for the next person to contact it. The next person that may be able to provide it with some kind of relationship, some kind of truth. But until then, it waits in the depths. Waiting.